What's up guys, my name is Ace, and now that Black Ops 6 has been out for quite some time, a lot of little issues have been piling up, and I've also just been noticing a lot of little things that I feel are missing from this game, and it's gotten to the point where I wanted to compile a big list of feedback and just share it all in one video today. Now, just to set expectations here, I'm not going to be focusing about the big, general, deep issues with the game, and instead I want to focus on the little things that would be reasonable to fix or add to the game without having to completely overhaul systems. So yes, the connection experience sucks, but that's not really going to be a part of this video because I don't have any focused feedback for that. It's basically just, please keep improving this. Also, no, I'm not going to be suggesting totally redesigning the maps that are in the game or anything, even though I think maps are one of the issues with the game. We're focusing on the specifics today. And I actually decided to split this up into sections. And the first section we'll talk about here is general gameplay adjustments and improvements that I feel could go a long way. And the first one is one that I have brought up before, but I still feel this is a problem. This is mantle speeds. In the game's current state, you can do a lot of things very quickly, but then it seems like when you want to mantle onto an object, it just takes so long. It's like you're just locked in place, and you feel like you're moving in slow motion relative to everything else you can do in the game. And it can often be a really jarring experience, and I feel it also limits many of your options as well. In a lot of situations, it's like, man, I'd really like to mantle on that, but I know that's just a death sentence because I won't stand a chance. I'll be locked in place and just a free kill. And to be clear, of course, there should be some risk attached to performing an action like mantling. I just think in its current state, that risk is way too high. So ideally, I'd like to see mantle speeds improved across the board, especially with those high mantle speeds that they said they improved, but based on my testing, it didn't actually change, or at least the high mantle that I tested didn't change. But even if they don't go the route of improving it across the board, I think attaching mantle speed improvements to something like dexterity would be an excellent addition as well, because I do think for a tier 1 perk, dexterity is extremely weak as well, so that would be a very appropriate change. And I actually still plan on making a perk feedback video, where I'm going to dive a whole lot deeper into the perk system. But I'm not going to be able to fit all of that into this video. However, this is the big one that I really wanted to bring up. Next up, on a somewhat similar note to that, I do feel like reloading in this game can feel very slow, again, relative to how quickly things are happening. And while I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to just improving reload speeds across the board, I think a more reasonable thing to ask for here is an improvement to Fast Mag 1. Since Treyarch really likes tying their reload speed to attachments rather than a perk, I think every single gun in the game should have the Fast Mag 1 attachment, and the Fast Mag 1 attachment should improve your reload speed without affecting your magazine capacity at all. In its current state, it does that with some of the guns in the game, but not all of them, and I think it should be consistent across the board. I'm totally fine with having like Fast Mag 2 and Fast Mag 3, and having those ones reduce your magazine capacity for an even more extreme reload speed improvement. But I think Fast Mag 1 should be a very consistent attachment that's available for every gun in the game, with zero downsides attached to it, aside from the fact that you're using up an attachment slot. Next up for general gameplay adjustments and improvements, I do want to briefly touch on spawns. Again, we're not going to get into too much detail here, but the main highlights here is I feel in the team deathmatch style game mode, so TDM, Kill Confirmed, or any others like it, the spawns are flipping way too often to the point where it feels just random, like enemies are coming from every direction and somebody could pop up from anywhere at any given time. Whereas on the flip side of that, in Domination, the spawns get way too sticky, which obviously sucks because you get basically spawn killed if you're on the receiving end, but then even on the giving end of that, when you're on the winning team, it's really boring, basically just shooting fish in a barrel. Now, to be clear, I do like map control in Domination, and I do prefer the spawns being a little too sticky rather than too flippy for Dom, but in their current state, they are way too sticky. You can have most of your team pushed right into the enemy spawn zone, and it just won't flip those spawns when it really should be. Next up, another little gameplay change that I think would go a long way, especially for face-off game modes. I think they should totally remove that chamber check animation on spawn. Especially with how the spawn system's working even outside of face-off, you're often getting into a gunfight within a couple seconds of spawning in, and having to deal with that animation that you can't turn off. Sure, you can try to cancel it by doing a double weapon swap, but that takes time as well. It just doesn't make sense to be spawning in and not be able to immediately fight back at the enemies that are immediately looking at you when you spawn. So that's partially a spawn issue, but that could at least be somewhat alleviated if we didn't have this animation that I just don't think has any place in a fast-paced game like this. After that, I'm going to put this in gameplay adjustments rather than quality of life or bug fixes, but in my opinion, if the enemy has the effects of Warcry active, you should be getting a separate hit marker that indicates that they do have those effects active, and therefore they're going to be healing significantly faster. I think that would reduce a lot of confusion in the game, as well as a lot of the false claims of skill-based damage that many people have. After that, another fairly minor thing that I think would be very nice, especially on the smaller maps, This is teammate-player collision. It would be nice if they could cut this down a little bit. Oftentimes I find a teammate is totally blocking a doorway and I just literally can't get past them. Or you're trying to slide, for instance, and you just bounce off your teammates. Even if it felt like you were just sort of grazing the edge of where your teammate was and you weren't directly running into them. I think if they were able to cut this down a little bit, it would reduce a lot of the complaints, and I don't think anybody would be pushing back against this. I think this would be a positive change for everyone. And then finally, for this gameplay adjustments section, I know I said I was going to get specific, but this one is a little bit more on the general side. There really seems to be a common theme with a lot of the feedback shared in the community, and this is streaks just feel too weak in general for how difficult they are to earn in this game relative to other Call of Duty games. And it would be nice to see some of the weaker streaks brought up a little bit so they have at least a bit more power to them. Now, the reason I'm not going to get too specific with this is I don't have access to all the data on how the streaks are performing, but Treyarch does have access to this data, and it would be nice if they just took a look through that, and if they see that some of the streaks are underperforming relative to their costs, I think it would be very welcome if they made some improvements to them. So that's it for the primary gameplay adjustments or improvements I'd like to see. Next, let's get into the section of bugs. And with this, of course, there are way more bugs than what I'm going to be listing here, but I'm going to try to focus on the ones that I think would have the biggest impact on the player base in general, rather than just the little tiny things that most people will never even notice. And the first one, which seems to be a pretty big issue since the launch of, I think it was Season 1 Reloaded, lobbies don't seem to be refilling, or at least not often enough. And to top this off, people seem to be leaving games more than ever, and honestly, I can't blame them with this connection experience. The matchmaking, I think, is really getting on a lot of people's nerves, and many people I know have gotten to the point where if they're not happy with where the algorithm decided to place them, they just leave the game. And I think that's kind of a logical conclusion that a lot of people are making there. And then also the spawns really contribute to this as well. If you end up in one of those really bad spawn traps in domination, you may as well leave the game, and I really don't blame you because it's not going to flip you out. In either case, this is made significantly worse when the lobby just never fills up after people do leave. And I've noticed it seems like the majority of the games that I play these days end with one team having way more players than the other team. And it's not like that's just from people leaving right toward the end of the match. Oftentimes, I'll be playing a good portion of the match either down several players or with such an advantage over the other players where it's like 6v2, and then your whole team is just fighting over killing those two players as they spawn in around the map. And that really isn't all that fun for anyone involved, so lobbies do need to be filled. I know it also sucks getting into games late, I get that, but in my eyes, it's totally necessary to keep things flowing. And it's far better than the alternative that we're dealing with right now, where oftentimes for a good chunk of the match, it's basically over and then everybody's just hunting down one or two people as they keep spawning in. Now, on a similar note to this, something I noticed before, but I can't test this because I can't seem to get into a match in progress, is when you do get into a match in progress, it doesn't seem to have that loss prevention attached to it, where if you get into a match late and lose the game, it doesn't count as a loss on your combat record. And I know a lot of people don't care about their win-loss ratio, but some people do. And that's at least something that can help alleviate that frustrating feeling of getting into a match that's already in progress, especially when you're losing. And another note there, it provides an incentive to just stick it out and play the rest of that match and not really have to worry about that outcome. Whereas if you leave that game, then that will count as a loss against you, so you may as well stick it out and work towards some camos or something. Next up, a fairly new bug that popped up that is fairly frustrating to deal with, especially for me where I'm in the gunsmith a lot. At the moment, you can't open the advanced stats screen when you're hovering over an attachment, and that was working just fine before. Now, a workaround to this is you can open up the advanced stats before you enter the individual attachment menu, and then it should stay up for you. But it just doesn't feel natural, and again, it was working fine before, and now this is broken and not working fine. After that, a perk bug that's popped up. I don't know when this one happened, but I know this was working back when I tested it. The Gearhead perk doesn't appear to be improving the charge rate of your field upgrades as it's meant to. And that's the primary reason to use Gearhead. So at the moment, it's just not doing what it's meant to be doing. Another one I've noticed quite a bit that's very frustrating is picking up guns in game. This will cause a huge hitch with the game, and the game just like freezes up for you for half a second, and that will often get you killed, and that shouldn't be happening. It should be a very smooth process to pick up an enemy's gun. Next up, something I haven't personally dealt with, but I've seen a lot of complaints about this, I believe since launch. Free-for-all win conditions are totally broken right now, and apparently the person that gets to 30 kills first, or has the most kills in the game, they're not the ones that are awarded the win for some reason, and that's obviously a very broken thing. Then in Search and Destroy, and perhaps other game modes, but I mainly just see people pointing this out in Search and Destroy, and I've never experienced this in like Domination before, but it does appear there is still a ninja glitch where if you don't reselect your loadout after each round, Ninja will just be disabled for you and not working properly, even though it's on the class that you're using. And that's obviously a very serious issue, especially in Search and Destroy, where footstep audio makes a huge difference in the gameplay. And then on top of that, spectators can hear footsteps as if Ninja isn't equipped. So if they're dead and spectating their teammate, they'll be able to hear all of the enemies that are using Ninja for their teammate and potentially give callouts to them. After that one, a bug that only a small portion of the player base is dealing with right now, but more and more people will be dealing with this over time. Once you hit Prestige Master, after every single game, you get an animation that plays that's like, congratulations for hitting Prestige Master. And that should really only be happening when you hit Prestige Master the first time, not after every single game. And on a similar note of animations playing when they really shouldn't be, when it comes to the events, especially the community events, it's really frustrating when you open that event tab to check the progress, and you have to sit and watch all these animations take place that actually take quite a bit of time, especially if you're in between games and you got a countdown ticking and you just want to quickly check that. That animation should only ever play the first time you open that event tab ever. And then after that, you should be able to just open it and check the progress really quickly at any time. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for the bug section. Again, I know there's probably a whole lot of other bugs out there, but these are the ones that I feel would be most impactful to the gameplay experience for the majority of the player base if they were to get fixed compared to some of the minor ones. Next, let's talk about quality of life features that I feel are just missing. Some of these were available in previous Call of Duty games and then they just didn't make it to Black Ops 6, whereas others are just things that I feel would make sense and would really improve the experience overall. The first one that I've seen a lot of people bring up is challenge tracking. This was an excellent feature that was brought to Modern Warfare 3 partway through the game's life cycle, if I remember correctly, and that feature hasn't made it to Black Ops 6 yet, at least. But in Modern Warfare 3, it was so nice to be able to select a bunch of challenges that you were actively working toward, like camo challenges or daily challenges, and then at any time in the middle of a match, you could just open up your menu and see exactly what your progress was. I absolutely love that feature in Modern Warfare 3, and I've really been missing it so far with this game. Similarly, another feature that I used a lot with Modern Warfare 3 is the group feature. That's something that also isn't available in Black Ops 6, and I'd love to see it there. That's how I generally connect with my viewers and let my viewers hop in and play some games with me while I'm streaming. And yet, that feature just doesn't exist right now, and therefore I have to resort to adding everybody to my Activision's friends list so they can join in and play in my games. And it was quite frustrating to see that feature not carry over. Next up, for console players especially that don't have a mouse and keyboard plugged into their console or available to be plugged into their console, with the recent sensitivity changes that they made, where they added the ability to make much finer adjustments to our sensitivity values, on controller there isn't a way of making these really fine adjustments. And when I initially tested this with my PS5, I also tried plugging in a mouse and keyboard and I couldn't get it to work, but now apparently that is working fine. But in my eyes, you shouldn't have to plug a mouse and keyboard in so you can make changes to your controller sensitivity. You should be able to do that with your controller, and you should have the same level of control over that as well. So definitely something that I think would go a long way if they could add that ability. Then I do have quite a nitpicky one here. Something I like that Black Ops 6 did is they brought back those party indicators in the lobby where you can see a little bar next to the people that are partied up. And that just lets you know what you're getting into with a match before you actually get in that match. You know if you're playing against a full party or multiple parties of 2 or 3, or maybe all solo players, for instance. My little nitpick with this is that bar is not always really clearly separated. Sometimes it seems like it's merging together, and you can't quite tell if that's actually a party of people or if that bar is just not displaying perfectly and there's a bit of an overlap there. So if possible, it would be nice for them to clean that up a little just to make some more clear separation between those parties. After that, another feature I love that Black Ops 6 added was the ability to customize our heads-up display. However, at the moment, if you customize your heads-up display for zombies, that also changes your heads-up display for multiplayer, and vice versa. And many people want a totally different heads-up display setting between different modes, and it's frustrating swapping back and forth and then having to change all your HUD settings to get them where you want them to be. And I just think by default, those should be separated. Next up for quality of life, something we actually lost with Black Ops 6, or at least PC players lost with Black Ops 6 based on what I've been seeing, is you can no longer see the ping of all of the players in the lobby on the scoreboard. And previously, PC has always had this option available, whereas for console players, we've never had this option where we can see exact ping values. And in my eyes, at least, all platforms should have access to this information. It's very important to know not only what your ping is, but what the general ping of other players in the lobby is as well, because you might have a really good ping, but it can still suck playing against people that have a higher ping. And if ping is king, like they always claim, why are they hiding it from us? That should be information that we all have access to see. And on a similar note, this one is a big stretch, but I ask for it every year. A great quality of life improvement would be the ability to set a ping limit in game. So you can opt into this, accept the fact that it's going to take you potentially much longer to find a lobby, but it will never be over a certain ping threshold. Or bring that feature back that Black Ops 2 used to have, where you have the ability to select your matchmaking option being best or fast. Where best would take longer, but you would generally get a better connection experience, whereas fast would just get you into the most appropriate lobby as quickly as possible, trying to find a reasonable connection for you as well. Now, I know this is a stretch to ask for in modern days, since I believe this would throw off their matchmaking system, even though, again, assuming that claim that ping is king is true, this shouldn't be affecting it at all, but I don't think many of us that actually play the game believe that, and I do think they want that ability to push your ping up a little bit in order to find a better skill match lobby, or recent performance match lobby for you. And there we go, that's gonna wrap it up for quality of life features that I'd really like to see that I think would really go a long way as well. And finally, this just leaves me with the miscellaneous section. I didn't know where to put these things as far as the other categories go, so these are just miscellaneous. The first big one that I think would be amazing to see return, this is Mercenary Mosh Pit. Please give solo players the ability to avoid playing against parties. Give solo players that safe space away from the parties. And again, even if it's just a mosh pit of some of the more popular modes like TDM, Domination, Kill Confirm, maybe Hardpoint, throw that in there as well. Although with Hardpoint, I think I could take it or leave it. That's something I would engage with quite a bit. You might see that I'm playing in a party in most of my gameplays. The reason behind that is the solo experience in this game is terrible. I really don't like playing this game solo at all, even though traditionally in Call of Duty, I really had no problem playing the game solo, and I often preferred it. I really liked the solo experience, but it's just often unbearable in Black Ops 6. And mercenary modes would make that feel a whole lot better. Next up in this miscellaneous section, let's talk about the events a little bit. Unfortunately, so far what we've been seeing with the events is just earn XP. And I don't find that to be very engaging or interesting, and it's kind of annoying seeing an event and getting excited for an event only for it to be like, all right, play the game, and that's how you unlock the rewards. I really like having events that have specific challenges to work toward, something that's actually engaging, maybe push you outside of your comfort zone a little bit, encourage or force you to use some different item or setup that you wouldn't normally use with your regular gameplay. That is much more exciting and engaging than play the game. And then finally, a piece of feedback that initially I was kind of like, it doesn't really make sense. I kind of understand where they're coming from, but now I'm actually on board with. This is for these special camos on weapons. In my opinion, once you unlock them for one gun, they should be available for all guns, regardless of where they're at in their camo grind. Because as it is right now, you have to finish all of your headshot challenges for a gun in order to use any of the special camos, even if it was earned with a different gun. And again, at first glance, I thought that made sense. But then when you realize that these special camos typically are earned really, really quickly, and then you're immediately onto your mastery camos, so your gold, your diamonds, your dark matters, for most players, by the time they really have a chance to look through that special menu, they've already got gold unlocked for their gun. And the majority of players in practice are going to use gold rather than a special camo. And this means many of those special camos that are fairly interesting at least, they end up going entirely unused because people already have their mastery camos by the time they have access to even try these out. And I know you could argue that's just a player problem, like if you want to use the special camos, use the special camos and not the mastery. But in practice, you don't tend to see that. And I think in situations like this, it makes sense to just adapt to player behaviors so that they end up engaging with these systems you created, rather than expecting them to adapt their behaviors, which they're just not going to do. And therefore, that feature you've created is just going to go largely unused and unappreciated. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for today's video on my fairly long list of little things that I think would really go a long way. I think if they were able to get on top of even just like half the things on this list, it would make for a very noticeably better overall experience with the game. And like I said, I think most of the things I mentioned today are very reasonable things to ask for. I don't think it would be crazy to expect a bunch of these improvements. But of course, this is just my list. These are just my thoughts. And I'd love to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Outside of the things that I mentioned today, what other specific pieces of feedback do you have? And again, I'd like you to focus primarily on the specifics, like individual things that you feel could use some work and what you'd like to see changed or improved. And if you guys enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.